All right. Hello, everyone. Going
Hotep.
to wait for people to come in.
Okay, so how are you, Amawi?
I'm doing great. It has been a fruitful, a lot of times people say busy, but it's been a very fruitful week. We are changing seasons, right? A lot of things are happening. It got a little cold in Chicago, but I love my layers, so I actually don't mind. And our master yogi, Master Yirser Hotep, is back in Chicago. So I'm so very happy to have you back and to hear about your trips and some other wisdom that you have to offer. It's always great having you home.
Yes, well, it's great to be back. Even though I wish I kind of wish I was still in Brazil.
Understandable.
Yeah, but uh, but it's all good. I'm here because I have to be different places. So, hello, I am all carbonated God. Hello, Calvin Muhammad. I see you there. Yeah, but yeah, it was quite a journey to get to Brazil and to be there. And we trained and certified about maybe close to like 27 new kemetic yoga instructors there. Yeah, so it was a really good experience. And then I had some downtime after the training was over, so I stayed about an extra 5 days and really took a vacation, which is something that I rarely do. And so, oh, I see Shad. Shad from Brazil is there. Um, and so Shad is one of our new instructors, but also a friend who I've known for a few years, who is also somebody who makes a lot of natural products. In fact, I've been using his skin cream every day on my skin and my hair. So if I'm looking extra, shiny or whatever, it's because of Shad. Yeah. And so I was able to learn a lot about new foods and new fruits that I had never tasted before, because a lot of the fruits there are regional, so some of them don't grow in some of them don't grow everywhere in in Brazil. So the area where I was at, which was in Bahia, in a town called Iticare, it was they had a lot of cacao. They had this fruit called oh, I know I'm gonna mess it up. Every time I start talking, in the public, I always forget the names of these different things. But there was a lot of different exotic fruits and stuff. And I noticed that I could see a difference in my body. I could see a difference in my health, where I feel, from just being able to consume those foods for almost 3 weeks. So I could see a big difference.
So, Master Yasir, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, your travels, and I know it's important to, pretty much promote Kemetic yoga throughout the diaspora because that's, who it is for. However, why did you choose Brazil? What is the significance of that location in the world, or the significance of those people that live there?
Well, Brazil is the largest African diasporic group outside of Africa. Some people might say India is the largest, because you can say that Brazil has about 100 million Africans, people of African descent. But we can also say that India has about 200 million Black people who are descended from the original inhabitants of India. A major group of them who we might call the Dravidians, so Brazil has a huge, significant population of Africans. Brazil has, especially in the area called Bahia, the culture of Africa has been preserved. The They still um, eat a lot of the foods that we may associate with with Africa. Their attitudes, the way that they think, the way that they honor elders and honor the culture is very African. You know, but the And they have a craving for the reestablishment of their culture and of their connection with Africa. And they're looking for, because the black people in Brazil, even though they are over half of the population, they have been marginalized, for decades. When you would see a song or a video, a movie about anything happening in Brazil, you would see white Brazilians. If you saw a commercial or an ad about Brazil, like some of the beaches in Rio and stuff, they would show you white people. And black people have been systematically taught to dislike themselves, to hate themselves, to not have honor for their Africanness, even the arts that they practice there. One art is called capoeira, right? So you have one capoeira called capoeira regional. Regional is how they would say regional, right? And that's like local variations of capoeira, which comes from Angola. You have capoeira Angola, and so capoeira Angola, or capoeira in general, it was banned. It was against the law. Capoeira is a martial art, and so it was disguised in the form of dance. So the movements look like dance, and they look like sort of tumbling, artistic type of movements and stuff that you would do, athletic, gymnastic type movements. But it was disguised but it was a martial art that was disguised in the form of dance, so that the enslavers and the colonizers wouldn't know that people were really preparing to kill them, preparing to do battle, training themselves, militarily. And so, that was banned. It was against the law to practice capoeira. It was against the law to practice candomblé, which is their form of African spirituality. And so, with that, even with candomblé, it had to be disguised within the Catholic religion. So instead of using straight out African representations of divinity like Yemaya and Oshun and Obatala and Ogun, they had to disguise it with saints and with Jesus and Mary and things like that. And so for as long as there has been Africans in Brazil, and there's probably Africans in Brazil prior to enslavement, because we know that there were expeditions of Africans coming across the Atlantic Ocean long before Columbus left there, long before Columbus went there. And we also know that there were that the original people who migrated into the area of what we call South America, we call Brazil, that those original people were Black people, that Black people migrated from Africa into all parts of the world, and so they are, so we have sisters and brothers who take the position that there have always been Black people in Brazil, and that the indigenous people there, that some of the people that we see there now that we call Black or African, that they were actually indigenous there much more earlier times, So, so when we plan on taking more trips there. We're gonna have, the next time I go, I'm gonna go. I'm actually planning on going back there pretty soon, but it's all gonna be to set up for future retreats. So we can bring people from our community there. We can bring people from the US there who can have a cultural exchange with the indigenous African people of Brazil and learn about the culture, experience the culture, eat the food. When I talk about the food, I'm talking about the fruits and the vegetables and all of these exotic things that provide us all types of different healing effects. That's what I'm talking about. And in addition to the local cuisine, cooked food and whatever, but the fruit and the juices that's there are phenomenal and they're very healing. And so we want to introduce people to these things. We want to introduce them to the environment, to the ecology, and how one of the people in our group who got certified, some of them were, one person was an archaeologist. One person was a young lady who worked with preserving the turtles, the turtle population. So a lot of times you think about, well, white people doing this type of work going to other countries, but there are black people. There's people of who are indigenous to those areas. This sister, she lives in the Amazon area of the Amazon, and that's where she's from, and she's a black woman. You know, so she looks African, but she's indigenous Amazonian. You know, so it's a lot of stuff to be learned there. And one of the issues is that Brazilians speak Portuguese. Most of the books that we have, like we have books by Yosef Benjo and we have books by J.A. Rogers, we have books by Sheikh Anta Diop, and so on and so forth. But unless you're able to read English, most of those books are not translated into Portuguese. And so a lot of the knowledge that we take for granted is knowledge that is rare and very hard to come about with our sisters and brothers in Brazil. So that's one of the motivations, and also because of the fact that they really want this knowledge, they really want the information, they really crave it. And there is a correlation between the capoeira movements and the kemetic yoga movements. One conversation one of the people who became certified is a capoeira master named Master or Maestre Wellington Bahia. Okay, and so in our conversations, we talked about how the movements of capoeira are reflections of nature. They're reflections of the movements that we see in nature. And that's how kemetic yoga is. Kemetic yoga is based upon sacred geometry, the movements, the postures, the different shapes and forms that we go into geometrically are based upon an understanding of the movements and the shapes and the forms that we see in nature. And so capoeira as an art form is working with the same dynamics. And so we can see a correlation between these movements, the movements of capoeira, the movements of kemetic yoga, the movements of African dance, the use of the drum and the different instruments, the different string instruments, the barrel bomb that they play when they're performing, and so on and so forth. So, there's a lot of reasons why, Brazil is very significant, and also there's a connection between Brazil, what's called Cape Verde Islands off the coast of Guinea in West Africa. And also you have other Portuguese speaking places in Africa called, like Angola and Mozambique, and so on and so forth. and they have very significant populations of people. And I communicate with people in Mozambique and Angola and Congo, Uganda, and all of them are interested in Kemetic yoga. I communicate with people through social media, and I see them wearing their ankhs around their neck. So they could be in Congo, but they're wearing an ankh, or they're connecting their consciousness to Africa through I don't know where my ankh is, through the through Kemet.
Symbolism, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
because Kemet is viewed, and rightfully so, is viewed as the classical civilization, the classic civilization of Africa.
Right.
So with Europeans, right, they look at Greece and
Hmm.
Rome
Hmm.
and the Latin language, the Greek language, as their classic origin. This is where they come from, right? And so we as Africans, we have to look towards Kemet because Kemet is the greatest flowering. It's not the only flowering of African civilization, but it is a very significant flowering of African civilization that we are able to still see the remnants of. Many of the civilizations, many of the great cities in West Africa, they were systematically destroyed. Okay, they were systematically destroyed by Europeans who wanted to deny the fact that African people built cities. They said that we were barefoot running
Hmm.
through the forest, through the jungle. Jungles don't exist in Africa, but this is what we're told. We see Tarzan swinging through the trees of the jungle. There's no jungles in Africa. We have rainforests, right? So they created this mythology. And so when we look at Kemet, we can see the flowering of this civilization. And so we see, and so what I have observed in my travels and in my communication with people all throughout Africa is that they connect with the Ankh. They connect with Kemet, no matter if they in Uganda, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana. You see a significant number of people connecting to Kemet and seeing the unity of African people through the lens of Kemet. Okay. And then when I get to the picture, I'm gonna show you a few things I want to talk about in that regard.
Yes, no, I can't wait, definitely. And I'm sure that our audience members feel the same way. So, everyone, you are listening to Journey to Amenta. That is the name of this podcast. And this series is called What They Don't Want You to Know About Yoga. So, if you have any ideas of what you believe yoga is, whether it's a definition or just something that comes to your mind, please write that in the comments so that we can either expand upon that either in this episode or in future episodes. So just so we can debunk certain, common beliefs and things of that nature. But one of the things that I wanted to comment on, Master Yirser, that you mentioned about capoeira, right, and the dance, right? Many times onlookers or Europeans will look at something and just say that this is just one aspect of something that Africans are doing, such as dancing. Like, oh, they're just messing around, right? They're just playing around. But there was so much, not only cultural significance, but also education that was happening while that they were dancing. They were teaching each other how to fight, how to also be stealthy, and also, with the movements, you have exercise that is, kind of secondary, if not. Just another benefit of the actual dance. And so I think that that's even a part of what people think about, yoga. Sometimes people will just look at yoga and say, oh, this is a workout, or oh, this is something to be mindful. But I think it's a lot more than that. And I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on that. What is yoga really, holistically, and not just, that kind of superficial idea of what yoga is, or what it can be.
Yeah, well, and that's because of these misconceptions about yoga, or the ways that yoga is being presented in the Western world. that's why we have so many misperceptions about kemetic yoga, right? And that so in general, people think of yoga as like an exercise, it's something that you do for flexibility and stuff like that, to improve your flexibility. And you can use yoga from a physical perspective to improve your flexibility. If you're an athlete, you can use yoga to improve your athletic performance and so on and so forth, right? But yoga is really a form of self-development. Um, Yoga is something that was created not to be a form of exercise, but to be something that allowed you to have a inner transformative experience, to experience yourself moving from one state of consciousness, one state of being, to another state of consciousness, another state of being, a state of consciousness where you are able to perceive your true nature. Okay. In my opinion, all of Kemetic and African spiritual science in general is designed to move you to a place where you discover who you really are, what your true nature is, what your true purpose is, what your true power is. And so the practice of yoga is this. I think that idea of yoga as a process of self-discovery, a process of self-realization, I think that this corresponds to the original intent of yoga, even as it comes from India. There is really no conflict between Kemetic and Indian. People all over the world, the Mayan, the Aztecs, everybody practiced yoga. The Chinese, Japanese, everybody practiced some form of yoga because they practice meditation, they practice breathing, they practice movement. It just may be in a different form. They may put a different name to it. But to say that, this is something that only comes from India is kind of absurd. But it does also exist in India. Okay. And so again, yoga is a form of self-development. It's a form of self-realization. Who am I? And it's like, okay, you could say self-realization from a philosophical perspective and say, well, you can be very intellectual with that. But with yoga, you have to go into your own self. You have to examine your own subconscious, self, your own subconscious mind, and really see deeper and go deep down into who, and do self-examination. Real yoga and real yoga practitioners challenge themselves. They challenge themselves to confront their pre-held beliefs, their pre-held assumptions, anything that they believe, anything that they think is real. They have to challenge those things and examine them to see, are my beliefs, are my feelings, is my self-concept something that is really valid, something that is really serving me, something that is really real? Is it real? Is it valid? Is it is it something that I could put value to, right? Is it something that really serves my purpose? And then from that, you can tear away parts of yourself, parts of your consciousness that has been created for you by the external social forces, by the external social forces, the external media forces, because we as human beings, we are very idiosyncratic. We are very ego driven. And so our perception of of who we think we are, our perception of what we think is real, takes precedence over anything else. And so we do, and so we often lose the capacity to have self-examination and to decide, is what I'm believing really good? Is it really valid? Does it really make sense? You know, so your religious beliefs are challenged. You know, that's why yoga and meditation are looked upon as threats by certain religious systems, because they know that when people start to practice this, when the people close their eyes and they start to breathe in and out, and they try to release the tension, release all the trauma that has accumulated in their mind and in their body, that they may begin to come to different conclusions. They may release the fear, right? That religion, that certain aspects of certain religions attempt to instill in people for the purpose of control. You know, in my opinion, from my perspective, when a religion tells me that God is jealous and vengeful, when a religion tells me I should fear God, even if it's in a metaphorical way, I'm not. Why should I fear that from which I came? Should I fear my mother? Should I fear my father? In any way, I respect, I give homage to them, and so on and so forth. But do I fear them because if I don't, they're going to punish me? Should I fear them because if I don't, they're going to send me to hell and burn me for eternity? You know, burn me for eternity because I didn't follow the rule. Burn me for eternity because I did not have water poured over my head, by the priest when I was born. So I have to go and die and be, and live in agony for eternity. This is what religion is teaching people. So yoga teaches the opposite. It teaches that we are connected to the divine, and we see images of this throughout the Kemetic record, that we are one with the divine. We are uniting with the divine. The divine source is sending the life, the breath of life from the divinity to the human, in order to give us life, in order to give us consciousness of our true nature. And that's what yoga is really about. It's in the process of your practice, we do movements, we do postures, we do breathing, we eat a certain type of diet which is healthy for our bodies. But at the same time, so at the same time, we are, we're making our body healthier, we're making our body more fit, but the purpose is not, but the purpose, the fitness, the flexibility, those things are side effects. The main effect that we're trying to get is the integration of the mind with the body. So if my body is in a state where I have limitation, if I put my arm up, my arm can only go up this high, then what does that mean? I want to integrate my mind with my body so I can get full extension. I want to use my breath as I train myself to overcome the limitations in my body. I am also training myself to overcome the limitations in my consciousness. Because when I train my body to go deeper into a posture, if I'm very stiff, and then I allow my body to loosen up, to open up, to get into a better sitting position, to get into my lotus position. In going through that process, I have to learn certain things that I call yoga skills. So those yoga skills are patience, perseverance, being loving to myself. Because oftentimes what happens is that when you are trying to achieve a goal and it doesn't happen fast enough, right? We become frustrated and we punish ourselves, right? And we say negative thought, we create negative thoughts. Yoga is the ultimate patience creator, because over time, like say for myself, it took me 7 years to do certain posture that I really wanted to do. And it wasn't because I wanted to do the posture because I wanted to just look good doing this posture, but it was a goal that I wanted to bring out to help me to master myself, to see that I'm able to overcome these obstacles. As I'm training myself to overcome obstacles or restrictions in my body, I am also training myself to overcome obstacles and restrictions in my mind, in my consciousness. So I'm able to transfer the skills that I learned in my practice, that I learned on the mat, into everyday life. And that's why I call what we do yoga skills, right? And yoga skills is a universal application of the principles of yoga into self-development and helping to create yourself, move yourself to a higher level of existence. And that's what we're trying to do. With Black people, with people of African descent, we look towards Kemet, or we look towards Africa, because our connection with our land, with our ancestral values, our ancestral systems of living, our ancestral systems of understanding the nature of reality, those things have been cut away from us intentionally in order to make us into slaves. Okay? The methodology for us to become slaves was to cut us off from our ancient and traditional reality. So that's why when you look behind me, you see the Uchat, you see the I. When you look around me, you're going to see Onks, you're going to see Heru, you're going to see Asar, you're going to see Aset, because we need to reconnect. In order to establish our mind, in order to restore our mind, to resurrect our mind, resurrect and restore our consciousness, we have to connect to our own original culture, not to Paris, not to London, not to Lisbon, not to New York. Those were the places that captured us. We need to connect back to Africa, because that is the source. And we're not going to go back and imitate and try to act the same way people was acting or doing the same thing people was doing hundreds or thousands of years ago. But we're going to take the principles of our past and utilize them to create a better future for ourselves. Because the system that the Europeans have put in place of this extreme capitalism, extreme materialism, extreme exploitation of nature and of other human beings, of animals, of the mineral life on the earth, the vegetable life on the earth, it is not working. It is destroying. And so the African aesthetic, the African way of philosophically viewing the universe is the opposite from this European concept. It's not to say that African people have never done anything wrong, or we have not had problems or issues we know within our behavior and our culture, but our overall fundamental principles are based upon values that that complement life and that move us towards life rather than death and destruction. So I don't want to get told so deep into that, but it's just all of these things is coming into my mind. And so I'm gonna finally just say that when you look at cosmology, one of the things that we have studied is cosmology, the study of the nature of the universe, the origins of the universe, the origin and nature of reality. When we look at cosmology, when we look at the creation stories of Africa, they're very different than the creation stories in the Bible. They're very different than the creation stories that we see from Greece, that we see from Rome, and the other European, um, you know, systems and other European cultures. So, when you do a comparative analysis, you can see that these differences in cosmology have resulted in the type of world that has been created by the European, in which we are dying. The rainforest is dying, the ice caps are melting, the waters, the lakes are decreasing in water, while the oceans are increasing and the coastal areas are becoming flooded. It's just a tremendous, places in the world that are supposed to be cold are now hot. Places in the world that used to be hot are now getting cold, so on and so forth. The world that they have created because of their beginning thought, their worldview, is resulting in destruction.
Yes, and you were talking about Greece before, and what's fascinating is I've met a few Greek people. I'm sure not all of them think this way, but I've met
Mm-hmm.
a few of them, and they've said, things like everything started and ended with Greece, right? That
Yeah.
is a very common thing that they say. However, when you go back to the books, their teachers, the Greek philosophers, their teachers were people in Egypt, right? It was sort of a standard that you could not, speak or act like you knew something in Greece unless you went to Egypt and studied under, the the teachings there, right? And I think one of the things that you have told your group is that, or your many students, is that in Egypt, in order to really complete that school of training and in spiritual training and really being in the way of Ma'at, that took 40 years, right? And so a lot of these Greek philosophers couldn't complete that, right? They wanted to do this quicker, and so they pretty much reframed and reworded a lot of their teachings and restructured that into something that they could say that they authored. And so one of the questions that I actually have for you is, one, why do you think people would try to mislead others with this teaching, with, teachings of how to be mindful or expanding your consciousness? So why would that benefit somebody else or another group of people to mislead another group of people on how to actually expand their consciousness or to be spiritual? And then my other question is, what beliefs do you think that people currently have on yoga, or not just yoga, but the origins of these spiritual systems that might be holding them back from their true potential or expanding their own consciousness?
Okay. So first of all, the reason why one group of people will want will want to deny another group of people access to their own knowledge of self is because of control. They want to control these people, and so they want you to look up to them and look down upon yourself. So the images that they created, that they intentionally created, was that we are white people, our skin, the skin of our women is nice and milky and you got devil food cake, and you got angel food cake. You got they just created a plethora of various images and metaphors that says that white is better. Okay, and they did this for the purpose of making us look down upon ourselves. So it's like what Carter G. Woodson said when he wrote the book, the the miseducation of the Negro. He said that the system of racism, white supremacy, the system of white or European cultural hegemony was designed to create a consciousness in black people where they would always go to the back door, and it would get to the point where when you go to the back door, when you go to the back of the house or the back of the building, and there was no back door, your training, your brainwashing would make you make a back door because that's where you're supposed to go. You are supposed to go to the back door, and you are programmed to go to the back door, and you will create a back door, if one did not exist. So that's what we're talking about. So we're talking about some very powerful brainwashing, some very powerful Stockholm syndrome that's been done, right? And so when it comes to yoga, right? I have respect for all yoga, but at the same time, we see that there are elements in India that look down upon black people, blackness, because there has always been this thing called a caste system in India. And the caste system became much more prominent and much more pronounced with the introduction and the domination of the religion called Hinduism. And so under Hinduism, it is taught that your current life that you're living is a product of your karma. Karma is the effect of what you did in a past life. So if you are suffering, if you are poor, if you are struggling now, it's because you did something in your past life that you should not have done. And so you are living the life that you deserve. Okay, that's the same thing they told black people, because they told black people in America who were enslaved that they were cursed because they were the sons of Ham, the sons and daughters, the children of Ham. And Ham was one of the children of Noah who committed some act that was against God that caused his descendants to become cursed and become the carriers of wood, meaning that you have to carry stuff all day, and you have to be the hewers of water. You have to carry water and wood and be a laborer. And so this same type of ideology is present in India. And so when I think about the fact that my own culture is the source of what we call spirituality, but my culture has been systematically suppressed. And then another culture wants me to say, oh, I'm going to learn your language. I'm going to learn your rituals. I'm going to learn about your deities, and so on and so forth. I know all the Indian yoga. I know Iyengar, Ashtanga, whether Kundalini, Bikram,
Hatha.
Hatha yoga is the overall umbrella, right? But within the Hatha yoga system, you have Iyengar, which is BKS Iyengar. You have Ashtanga, which is Patobi Joyce. You have Kundalini yoga, and so on and so forth. You have some great yoga masters who I admire. But when I read some of their writings, they talk about the fact, or they talk about the idea that the so-called, who they call the Bushmen, they say the Bushmen, which is us, Black people, cannot rise to the level of higher consciousness because we're Bushmen. We live in the bush, right? That's what they say. It's in their yoga books when you read them. I've been reading this stuff since the 1970s, right? And so they, because there's a built-in innate aspect to yoga from India that has a negative opinion of Black people, of dark-skinned people. Now, I'm not saying every person who practices yoga is like that, but I'm saying there's this aspect. There's aspects of various cultures and various systems which are excellent, and other aspects which are undesirable. And so this is an undesirable aspect within that culture, and that it underpins the caste system. In the caste system that presently exists in Africa, in India, the people at the highest caste, those are white people, the whitest skinned Indians, the Indians who are our complexion, got hair like yours, and skin like mine, they are at the lowest caste. But those people, those are the original people of India who started yoga, who built the great cities in the Dravidian area of India, who created the civilization, who created the art, the language, so on and so forth. Those people today are the ones at the bottom. We as African people, we are at the bottom of the socioeconomic level, the socioeconomic ladder, because of the same reason. So that's why we have an affinity with the so-called Dravidians or the untouchables of India. That's why my friend, who I grieve over the fact that he is gone now, Dr. Runoko Rashidi, that's why he went to India. And he spoke in front of 50,000 of the Dalit people at a big rally, a big they were practicing black power. They had a Black Panther Party of India among the Black people who are called the Dalit. And Runoko told me that after he spoke there, that the some representatives of the Indian government or somebody tried to gangster him and told him not to ever come back, or else he may not ever make it out of India again. This is the story that Dr. Runoko Rashidi's told, right? So the other part is that the indigenous original people of India, they actually resent Hinduism, and they resent the language which we call Sanskrit. When you go to a teacher, because they say that language and that religion is the religion and the language of their oppression, okay? Because it's codified in Hinduism that we must suppress the Black people, the darkest skinned people, because they use a principle called Varna, V-A-R-N-A. Anybody who don't believe me think I'm just talking a whole bunch of crazy stuff, look up V-A-R-N-A. It's a color coding system. And that the original divinities or gods of the original Dravidian people who built the first civilization in India, their god was not called Brahman. Brahman is a Hindu god. His head, his whole body is color coded. His head is white, his feet are black, and his Parts of his body is yellow, red, brown, so on and so forth, denoting the different divisions of people. So this whole idea of colorism and division of people by color, this is coming from India. That's why Hitler sent his expeditions like a fool to India and Tibet and stuff, looking for, the origins of racism, looking for the, proof of the Aryan race. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of stuff people have to check out. Have to read and go study about, to really understand this stuff. But having this perspective is one that fuels me and moves me towards, the rediscovery of my own culture. I don't want to, if I go to do a teacher training course, why do I need to learn Sanskrit? I've heard Black people say Sanskrit is the first language of humanity and it came straight from God, because this is what the Hindu people are teaching them, that Sanskrit is the language of God. The only way you can learn yoga, you have to learn Sanskrit. So they teach you how to do all of these different positions, all of these different words, all these different concepts. They teach you how to chant and say all these different things and worship these different divinities, right? These different deities in Sanskrit. So they want you to become part of their culture. And then now that the people in California have gotten control over all Indian yoga and over all Eastern philosophy, each Eastern spirituality, they don't want you to look towards Africa, right? Towards for for your inner concept of who you are. They don't want you to look towards Africa and go to the shaman or to the African, go to the Babalawo in Nigeria. They want you to go to the Swami guy in India, because that's the narrative that they're trying to create. Because yoga is what? It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Our school of Kemetic yoga is a member of something called the Yoga Alliance. Yoga Alliance has over 100,000 yoga schools as members, and I don't know how many yoga teachers as members. So Yoga Alliance is a multi-million-dollar organization that controls the narrative of what is yoga. You got the magazine called Yoga Journal, controls the narrative of what is yoga. They would not put an article about me or Kemetic yoga in there unless they did it like they did back in 1996, where they put a cartoon of an Egyptian person looking like this with the question, did the ancient Egyptians do yoga? And they wrote it, and instead of accepting the long article, they put an article that was this big, like two paragraphs, with that insulting caricature of an Egyptian person. And then after that, they edited us out of every article that anybody ever submitted that talked about Kemetic yoga or African yoga or Egyptian yoga or whatever, So so when I'm talking about these things, I'm talking about things that I've experienced and accumulated over almost 50 years of doing this type of work. And back in the day, I had friends who were part of the Hare Krishnas. And the Hare Krishnas, they tell you that there's a white Krishna and there's a black Krishna. And the white Krishna was good, the black Krishna was bad. And some of these people were told that if you join the Hare Krishna, you need to marry a white person in order to break this curse that was on the black Krishna, because you black. So you need to break this curse by being with a white person. You know, this stuff is crazy. But people don't understand these things. People are just looking at the superficial, the way Yoga Journal and Yoga this and Gaia and Gaiam, the way that they're presenting these things, right? They're not looking at the hard, cold facts, the hard, cold politics of what's happening. But that's what I'm doing.
So one thing I wanted to say, you talk a lot about this polarization, right? Talk a lot about a lot of Europeans or people with European thought separating things and saying that one is good and that one is bad, right? And this is a very typical tactic that Europeans make. And even Marimba Annie in her book Yurugu, she talks about this, right? That this is their asili, or like the seed in their culture that they really expand upon. How can we separate you away from us and then say that not only are you different and that this is a negative trait, but that this is actually why we are better than you, because you are different from us in all these different aspects, right? You had talked about the Bushmen people, which I think can also be related to pagan people, right? But what pagan actually means is just to be of the land. And when I hear a Bushman, I hear people in a bush, right? But
Right,
in the land and being of the bush, like these are people who were one with nature. These are people who understood nature instead
right,
of looking at nature as separate from themselves. It's something that they have to control or fight, right? These are people who understood the realities of the world. So when you came, or when they came and tried to impose these different sanctions or languages on them, they looked at them like they were crazy. Like, what are you trying to do? Like, we already know how the world works, right? And so that's this kind of left brain thinking versus right brain thinking. A lot of Africans are right brain thinkers because we synthesize, we bring things together, right? We are holistic thinkers, as opposed to being separate thinkers. So everything you're saying is really resonating with, I think, a lot of our audience. And there was actually a question or two that I wanted to speak from somebody coming from YouTube. I am all carbonated guy, which I love that name, by the way. I'm going to put your comment up here on the screen. And so they said, I was wondering how long I should practice yoga every day, especially if I want to become an instructor. I've been doing 40 to 50 asanas a day from BKS Iyengar Light on yoga, but I want to do more. And another thing I wanted to add that the same person posted was, I needed to be here in this live. I feel I've been practicing yoga from Iyengar for 31 days now, but my path started from reading Muwada Ashi's book on Egyptian yoga postures. And I know you have some things to say about Muwada Ashby. So if you would like to respond to their question.
Well, I'm an advocate for kemetic yoga, and so Iyengar, I know Iyengar yoga. I respect Iyengar yoga, but one of the differences between Iyengar yoga and kemetic yoga or yoga skills method is that we put a really strong emphasis on the breath. Our goal in our practice is to use the breath in order to move us through the poses. Um, our goal in our practice is to allow the movements to be geometric, okay, not to be static. We want our bodies to flow, and we want our bodies to flow in coordination with the breath. We want our bodies to be an extension of the breath. So the breath, or our controlled deep breathing, is the modus operandi by which the body is moving. And so we are moving energy. We are more than just a physical body. We are energy. We have this physical thing here, this matter, this material body made of matter, so on and so forth. But we also have another aspect of our body. We have many aspects of our body. In ancient Kemet, they use terms like the Ba, the Ka, the Ku, the Aku, the Rin. We have many aspects to our being. And so when we practice yoga, we're trying to cultivate and bring forward those other aspects of our body, those other aspects of our energy, those other aspects of our soul, those other aspects of our spirit, those other aspects of our personality, and so on and so forth. So, kemetic yoga is done slowly, it's done with the breath. We go into many of the postures that we see on the walls of the temples. We go into those various shapes and forms, right? Geometric shapes and forms, because they have particular effects upon the energy centers and the energy channels that move through the body. So when we practice kemetic yoga, we're looking at how do we move the energy through the energy channels of the body. Okay, because in India, in the Indian yoga system, they have this idea of energy channels called nadis, right? They have a in China, they call these energy channels meridians, right? In traditional Chinese medicine, when you go to get an acupuncture, they put the needle into different points along the meridians in order to activate. In the practice of kemetic yoga, we recognize that we have these energy channels and we're trying to move energy. And certain postures that we do are designed to activate the energy channels that will result in certain effects upon the body and upon the mind. Okay. In Iyengar yoga, which I respect very much, because I practice Iyengar yoga, but I never followed the instructions. I use the breath. Iyengar yoga is focused on alignment. So Iyengar, BKS Iyengar, who was a master teacher, who was a master of yoga. His book, Light on Yoga, is phenomenal, right? But when you go to his class, he have like a little stick, and he pop you with the stick if your hip was sticking out, if your thigh was not straight, and stuff like that, you know. And so he was a stickler for alignment, you know, which is fine. But the emphasis was not on the breath, controlling the breath. In most forms of hatha yoga, you do movements and postures, and movements and postures are separated from breathing exercises. So they do movements and postures on one side, then they do breathing exercises and meditation on the other side. In kemetic yoga, we combine it all together, right? So your movements and your postures are your meditation. Your movements and your postures, you are performing controlled deep breathing. In your movements and your postures, you are causing energy to rise and to move and to circulate through your body. Okay. This is what, you know, we're trying to accomplish, you know, through our practice. Also, in our practice, we want to connect with our ancestors and with our Neteru. The word Neteru, N-T-R-U, Neteru, refers to what the Europeans called the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt. Okay, but we are not. That is, we don't use that term gods and goddesses, right? So because when you're going into African spiritual science, it's a whole different paradigm, you know, and that's what people don't understand. They want to go into the easy route that's already set up for them by another group of people. So with kemetic yoga, we had to reconstruct this system. We had to rediscover, you know, what this yoga is. We had to go and look at the images on the walls of the temples and understand what are they from a different perspective, you know, and then create this system, or, you know, innovate this system that we call kemetic yoga. And so I would just tell my carbonated goddess sister, you know, that or carbonated god. I would say I saw the likes. I hope it's a sister. But if we either way, the person who is I am all carbonated God. Um, I would say that you know, all yoga is good. It's not going to harm you, but you know, I like kemetic yoga. So if you're really looking for something different, you know, we have YouTube, we have our own videos that you can acquire either by watching YouTube or you can acquire them by going into our website to purchase courses and so on and so forth. We're going to be offering after maybe next week. We're going to be offering a lot of different new courses, you know, on our website that people can participate in. So,
And I think another question that is, just to expand upon what you just said, what is the difference between Kemetic yoga and Egyptian yoga, or that sort of history behind those two disciplines?
well, in the beginning, when I first started studying yoga with my teacher, Dr. Azar P, we just called it yoga, right? And but we were already incorporated because Dr. Hapi is a naturopath, which is a type of healing system that deals with movement of the body, manipulation of the body. It's similar to chiropractic, but with napropathy, Naprathy. With napropathy, the emphasis is on using the breath to open up the neck. Have the person breathe in slowly, then slowly exhale, as opposed to just quickly cracking your neck, quickly cracking your spine. Everything is done slow. And so these principles of slow movement coordinated with breath are incorporated into the methodology and the technique of Kemetic yoga. And so in 1976, 1977, we were practicing yoga. And then we were already aware of the fact that civilization, science, all these different things have their origins in Kemet, had their origins in Africa. And in 1977, I think, the exhibit with the artifacts from the tomb of Tutankhamun came into Chicago. And when those artifacts came, there was a chair in the artifact. So the back of the chair here, it had the pose of what we call the pose of mortality. And so when we saw that, we said this is the key to understanding. We said number one, we said this is a yoga posture. Okay, so like our logo up in the corner, I think people can see that up in the right hand corner. That is supposed to be mortality. It's an ancient Kemetic Neteru whose name is He. And so once we started to do research and we started to add more into our understanding of this idea that yoga has an origin in Egypt, in Kemet, we started to use the term Egyptian yoga. Okay. Now we knew the word Kemet, we knew the word Kemetic, but we did not use that term. We used the word Egyptian. Okay, because that was the common word that people use, the Egyptian or ancient Egyptian. So we called it Egyptian yoga or ancient Egyptian yoga. Okay. And so then maybe about 25 years later, a guy wrote a book. And the name of his book was Egyptian Yoga. Okay, so this guy was Mawata Ashby, right? And so he called me up and he said, told me his name. He told me he wrote a book called Egyptian Yoga. So in my mind, I said, that's interesting because we've been doing Egyptian yoga all the time. And plus my teacher has a video that he produced in about 1980. The video is called Egyptian Yoga, and it explains the concept of Egyptian yoga, and it gives a demonstration of the movements and some of the movements and some of the postures of Egyptian yoga. So I said it was interesting that somebody 20 something years later has now written a book and saying that they're using the same title. But when I looked at the book, there was no attribution to the fact that it didn't say nothing about Dr. Azar Hapi. It didn't say nothing about me. It just talked about, my name is Mawata Ashby and I created this yoga, right? So I really didn't. And then when I looked at the some of the philosophy that was presented in the book, when I look at the postures, in my opinion, they were not the best. When you write a book, when you put anything out to the public, it's going to become criticized. So he sent it to me because he wanted to have a critique. And so my critique was that it's weak. My critique is that some of the philosophical and historical ideas that you're presenting in this book are not correct. And that the way that you're doing these different positions and poses are not correct either. And they're harmful. They're going to actually injure people's bodies if they imitate the way that you're teaching them. One of the things that I take great pride in with kemetic yoga is safety and what I call quality assurance and best practices. Any type of profession that you go into, there should be an extreme focus on best practices and quality assurance and also safety. And so we know that kemetic yoga is safe because we use principles of anatomy and physiology. I see people, who say Egyptian yoga and they put stuff on YouTube and they never ever use the word breathe. They never ever said the word breathe in or breathe out. I've seen somebody do a whole hour-long Egyptian yoga exercise in front of the step pyramid of Saqqara in Kemet and never told people to inhale or exhale, but he's trying to say this is how you do yoga. Any person who does basic hatha yoga knows that you should inhale and exhale at some point, and they should put that as part of their instruction. So therefore, because there was so much confusion of people getting confused with Egyptian yoga and the yoga that we were doing and the yoga that this other person had created, that I don't feel had anything to do with. It had nothing to do with the yoga that was created and rediscovered and developed in Chicago by Dr. Hapi and myself. So I determined that we should use the term kemetic yoga to separate it so that it would not be any type of confusion, because people were using so I started to use the term kemetic yoga. So then after I started using the term kemetic yoga, then the people doing Egyptian yoga, they started saying kemetic yoga too, because they wanted to be part of the coattails of kemetic yoga, right? And it doesn't make, it's like Patobi Joyce, who created Ashtanga yoga, and BKS Iyengar, who created what's called Iyengar yoga. It's two different systems. Both of them had the same teacher, but Iyengar yoga is Iyengar yoga. Ashtanga yoga is Ashtanga yoga. You don't see people who do Iyengar yoga then switch and say, oh, I'm doing Ashtanga yoga, but they're still doing Iyengar yoga. And you don't see people doing Ashtanga yoga and then they try to do Iyengar yoga, use the word Iyengar yoga because they think Iyengar is more popular. You see what I'm saying? So they try to get onto the coattails of the other. And so I thought that when I started to say, well, this is kemetic yoga, it would cut the confusion. But then the people who was doing so-called Egyptian yoga underneath this particular person, they started to use the term kemetic yoga too. And so it was too confusing, and people were getting upset because they thought they was going to be getting kemetic yoga and they was getting Egyptian yoga, and they was complaining to me about people being deceitful towards them. And so I had to have a kind of a talk or a discussion with people. And I said, can you please just use Egyptian yoga and stop using kemetic yoga? Because it's too much confusion. It is going to get you in trouble because people are complaining about you deceiving them or making them feel as if they're being deceived. And so this is the problem. And so at the same time, you have Samai Tawi, right? So the word Samai Tawi.
I'm so glad that you're going to talk about this. This is my last question for you.
Okay, yeah. So Samai Tawi means to unite to two lands. And so in one of the images I have, I'm going to show you where this term comes from in terms of uniting upper and lower Kemet, okay, the north and the south, uniting them together. The first person to use this term in reference to yoga in terms of uniting was a man named Babacar Khan from Senegal. Babacar Khan is in his 80s now. When I met him, he was 82. Babacar Khan was a protege, a friend, a colleague of Sheikh Anta Diop. Sheikh Anta Diop is our greatest Kemetic scholar who ever lived so far, right? And Babacar Khan was his friend, his colleague, his confidant, right? His name is Baba. They call him Yogi Khan, okay? And so sometimes because he's from Senegal, he's French speaking and Wolof. He's French and Wolof speaking, but he's in the world that he operates in with yoga, he speaks French. And so he calls his yoga of the pharaohs, or he calls it Samai Tawi. So Samai Tawi is a word that Babacar Khan used as an attribution towards yoga from Kemet. He's never said that the people in ancient Kemet used the word Samai Tawi for yoga. He never said that. He said this Samai Tawi, when I look at the symbols of it, when I look at different things, it reminds me of the idea of yoga. Okay? So he used that word, but he never said that the ancient Egyptians or the ancient people of ancient Kemet used that word, and that's what they called it, right? And so, but other people came later, and they started saying the name for yoga from ancient Kemet is Samai Tawi, and that's the name that they use, and they was doing this, and they was doing that, and they was doing all these different things, right? When I was not alive in ancient times to see the ancestors doing how they practice yoga, I was not alive then. What I have done, what my teacher has done, we look at the symbols, we look at the walls of the temples. I've been to Kemet like 32 times, right? So I go there every year, twice a year, to study, to look at the walls, to see the artifacts. And I discover something new all the time, So when we talk about Kemetic yoga, we're not saying that this was exactly what they did when they would practice, but we can see that they had these symbols, they had these movements and postures, And we can see that when I do these movements and postures, when I train other people to do these movements and postures, everybody report a very positive feeling, a very positive result, a healing result within their body, within their joints, within their internal organs, within their mind, within their consciousness. Everybody reports that they feel more connected to spiritual things related back to Kemet. Everybody says this. So that is my proof, of Kemetic yoga. You know, everything in Kemet was not written down explicitly or expressly. It is my speculation that things like yoga were done in a secretive way, in a way that was like a closely held methodologies and practices amongst certain priests and certain people that was higher up. Okay, because when I go to Kemet, I've learned certain things because I can just look at the pose of immortality, and then we figured out how to go into it, how to come out of it. But there's other things that I've learned over time that I've been away from my teacher for. I studied with my teacher for about a year, 2 years at the most. The rest of the almost 50 years I've been studying on my own and accumulating the knowledge and information. And so, like as I used to tell my friend Winoko Rashidi, I said there's different ways of acquiring knowledge. You can acquire knowledge through research and study and stuff like that, but it's also an intuitive method of acquiring knowledge. It's a method of downloading information. And so when it comes to kemetic yoga, we're doing both of those things. We're looking at the record that's been left by ancestors. We're interpreting it. We're learning how to read and write and speak the language. We're looking at the opinions of this scholar and that scholar about the meaning of this particular symbol and what it means, what it represents, and so on and so forth, how it was used, what period of time was it in use, and where did it fall out of use? We're looking at a lot of different factors, right? Because we want to be scholars and historians, but we also want to be intuitive. We also want to be people who have the ability to discern reality excuse me, from downloading this information. And so everybody does that. So in ancient Kemet, they had a concept called Resut Qued. Okay, Resut Qued means to be asleep, to be awake while asleep. To be awake while asleep. The symbol for Resut Qued is a bed with an open eye on top of the bed. Okay? And so what this means is that I am able to go into a deep state of meditation, a deep state of transcendent consciousness, and I am able to remain aware of my place, my state, my circumstances. But at the same time, because I'm in this really deep state, of consciousness, I am also awake and aware, and I'm able to do things. I'm able to discover things. I'm able to make my inner, make my body that I imagine that I see myself having. I'm able to go above and beyond the limitations of the material world. Okay, and so I discover things. Okay, so what am I talking about? Read up on Einstein. Einstein was one of the greatest scientists, right? In history, one of the greatest, at least of the 20th century. he came up with um, theories that changed the whole nature of reality that we live, right? But Einstein said that the key to his discovery was from a dream. Okay, from a dream. So Retsu Qued relates to dream, going into this dream state in order to discover information, going into this dream state in order to heal the body, to heal the mind, to gain the ability to become, to go above and beyond the limitations of your material condition. You know, this was what Resu Qued means. And this was practiced in ancient Kemet. If you went to one of the temples, like the temple that they call the Temple of Dendera, you would go there and you say, I'm sick, I have this illness, or I have this depression, I have this psychosis, I need help. And the priest and the priestesses there will help this person to learn this type of meditation, to learn this type of practices, and to learn how to have these dreams. And they will help them to interpret their dream. They will help them to overcome. They will help them to use this state of consciousness that they was able to go into to allow their bodies and allow their minds to heal, you know. So you could be traumatized by war. You could be traumatized by, you know, any type of circumstance, you know, that afflicted people at that time. So all these things existed in ancient Kemet. And so
So, Master Yirser Hotep obviously is extremely learned and very passionate about this practice and about the practice of healing for all human people, especially for African, the African diaspora, right? Because of all of the trauma, all of the we have been pushed away from our home, separated from our ancestors and from the thought, right, which really connects us to this true source that allows us to intuit knowledge, to download this knowledge. So obviously, like I said, he has a lot of information. We're a little bit over our time, and I just wanted to say thank you everyone for coming and tuning in to the journey of Amenta, this podcast. Again, this series is called What They Don't Want You to Know About Yoga. And again, we just really just scratched the surface. So we'll be doing this every week on Friday at about 2 p.m. But stay tuned to the time through the newsletter. So if you're not subscribed to Master Yirser's newsletter, please go to kemeticyogaskills.com and you can register there. There's also a lot of other training outlets. There's online training. He'll be going to Egypt and Ghana, right? Both places in November.
Yeah, Egypt and Ghana, November and December.
Mm-hmm. So definitely register for that. So not only do you get a tour and exclusive time with the master himself, but you also get to become certified in kemetic yoga. Another way to become certified is to come to the studio itself, which is in Bronzeville at 4507 South Indiana Avenue. It's a great studio. As you can see, it's right behind him. It has altars, beautiful bathrooms. There's a juice bar and a massage chair as well. So definitely come and join with the community that's already there, just learn a little bit more about even the Bronzeville history, because Master Yirser is from that location as well, so he knows a lot about the history of Bronzeville. So anyways, we'll be doing this every Friday at 2 p.m. So stay tuned. If you're not already following him on Instagram, please go ahead and follow him at Kemetic Yoga Official, Kemetic Yoga Skills Official. And on Facebook as well.
Do we have time to show one image I have here?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to tell them to stay tuned. But if you would like to, I can't argue. But I would say,
okay.
We'll
save it for next time. Then we can go through the whole line so we can start off. But I think this was a good a good jump off point. So if people are interested, I'm sure they can still find this. This will be posted online, but they can still find it right on YouTube and stuff.
Yes, yes. So it'll be on Facebook. It'll also be on YouTube and also on LinkedIn. So
Okay.
because this is streaming in those three platforms, you can also find it there. We will also be sharing this video in full on his YouTube channel. So that's at Yoga Skills on YouTube, and we'll also be cutting this up into smaller clips that are more digestible for his Instagram page, which again is Kemetic Yoga Skills Official. So definitely stay tuned, and also, take the time to meditate on this information. There's a lot of information given. Next time, now to bring your notebook, because there's a lot of things that you should be looking up, like Varna, like certain, just certain terms that he mentioned throughout the entire podcast. So thank you, Master Yirser, for taking your time out to educate the community at large, and we hope to see each and every one of you next time.
Well, thank you, Amawi, for your excellent stewardship of this program. It was wonderful. Thank you for stopping me. All right.
Very happy to be here. See you guys all next time and have a great weekend.
All
Peace.
right, Hotep.